Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Golden Gad. Used to be a caster for UCI, also doing some Tier 2 and Tier 3 work for League of Legends North America. So I'm pretty excited to get into something that I wanted to do really badly before this split started. This is going to be the LTA North 2025 Power Rankings for the winter split that is upcoming. I mean, it's kind of a split, kind of a mini split, but either way, I wanted to do it today in particular because, you know, that split is just around the corner and definitely some big changes upcoming for both the meta and some of these teams as well as we go into 2025. I guess most notably, as a preface, there are now 8 teams. I mean, we kind of dealt with that before, but if you haven't been watching for a while, 8 teams. And also there was a whole kind of team shuffle. A lot of teams ended up on different rosters besides the top of the table, which ended up pretty much exactly the same since they had pretty good performances for Worlds. And that's something that I will be considering when it comes to these power rankings, because this is not just power rankings for the teams themselves. This is also going to be the player power rankings, and we're going to be going through those first. And you'll see why, because for me, the player power rankings always come before the team power rankings. It gives me some sort of structure and allows me to do some math, which you'll see later, on how these teams actually stack up against each other in my brain. And you know, if you're new here, I always love feedback. If you think you disagree with anything, please drop it in the comments below. I'd love to go at it in the comments, of course. So if you disagree, you have that place to express that disagreement. Having the thoughts to actually just move forward is always amazing, and I love seeing the community interact. So let's just get into it. So we're going to start with, of course, the top lane pool, of course, because that's the first role. And top lane coming into this meta is going to be pretty interesting since, for the most part, it's going to be a big focus. We're seeing a lot more supportive AD carries, which has meant a lot more strong side tops, things like Rumble, things like Jace. I have been watching LCK a bit, and top lane has completely shifted. It's not this stay alive, stay safe lane, as it can be. Of course, you could still pick Cassante, do your thing, but a lot of the other safe picks have kind of fallen off. Like things like Udyr, we saw a lot last year, have really just fallen out of presence because you do want a strong top side. So, as a result, these player rankings also take into account meta factors, which is why you'll see some certain individuals in different spots than you might expect. So, let's take a look. Top lane, we got ranked 1, Bwipo, Impact, Thanatos, Fudge, Surdy, Castle, General Sniper, and Licorice. In that order. And already, I already know people are going to call out one particular name on this list, and that's Surdy at number 5. But we'll wait on that. Let's just go through the standard first 4 here and kind of provide my rationale here. So Bwipo definitely improved a lot as the year went on. Towards Worlds, of course, he was doing extremely well. He has this very attention-heavy playstyle where he doesn't... It's not actually his own team's attention. He's taking actually the enemy's attention and trying to play around that as the kind of win con, so you pull resources away. And in a meta where you're trying to, you know, have your top lane be kind of central, I'm not sure if he'll actually be the best fit, but the champions that are in the pool definitely fit Bwipo. Things like Rumble, Bwipo is quite proficient at, and which you'll see with Impact as well. These champion pools are pretty good for this meta, which is not something you see all the time. You know, sometimes the champion pool really determines how the player will do, which is what we really saw in mid last split, which we'll touch on in just a little bit. But yeah, Bwipo, Impact, easy 1 and 2. I don't think anyone's going to be debating that. Next, I'm going to put Thanatos. I said strong side top lane is going to be important, and Thanatos is, you know, he's the mechanically proficient top laner that always went up in CS, always had more gold than the opponent, at least pre-15 minutes, so definitely he showed his chops coming from that Damwon Challengers roster that was so successful, but they couldn't make it happen because it felt like there was a lot of teamfight cohesion issues, which I think they solved in some of the other pieces in the team. But Thanatos on its own in the top lane pool should be perfectly fine. Now, Fudge, moving on, obviously did not have the greatest year coming out of that last one into this one. You know, did get removed from C9, all that stuff. I think there were a lot more factors going on. I think the style of being an isolated carry that can still find pressure, kind of similar to Bwipo in that way. Maybe not as proficient, but that's why he's at number 4. But that's kind of his style. And yes, things like Renekton for both Bwipo and Fudge have kind of fallen off. Same for Aatrox and Udyr. But at the same time, the pool of having Rumble and Jace is something Fudge has played before, even though people hated it back then when it was Berserker, Fudge, Sven support, because, hey, you have Berserker, why are you playing Jace? But now, it's a lot more, it makes a lot more sense to be playing Jace when you now got Sven as your AD carry. Well, at least in C9's case, but now, of course, this is coming into a more solidified team, which you'll see I actually do have quite a bit of a positive opinion on Shopify, as they are pretty sturdy roster, I'd say. So I think Fudge will do quite good in this one, and I don't think he'll have many consistency issues like some of the top laners below him. Surdy, Castle, General Sniper, and Licorice are going to round out that list. Of course, Surdy being above Castle, General Sniper is probably surprising to some of you. But if you don't know Surdy, obviously he is the king of tier 2, really. He has done pretty much everything you can do before reaching LCS as a tier 2 player, and I think those accolades alone should prove that he is definitely of a certain caliber. You know, his teams were of varying skill, but he still made it to finals or winning every single time. So I'd say Surdy really a standout player that you have to watch out for, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I know some people aren't believers because it's hard to buy into all the hype that's going on, but trust me, Surdy definitely more consistent than Castle and Sniper, and just more proficient than Licorice in my opinion. So definitely going to be seeing that as well. Castle I put above General Sniper. I know people have negative opinions on Castle as well. The problems with Immortals last split was not Castle. Let's be clear. I mean, the problem with a lot of these bottom teams are usually not the top laner. I'll just say that. Usually it's a bigger system issue, or maybe some of the other players that are in more crucial roles really are not up to par. But Castle definitely is a great team fighter, and that's kind of what you want in this team. I feel like you have a lot of roaming power with some of the other pieces they picked up. I'm going to put Castle at 6. That's just what I decided. 7, General Sniper. I'm a little bit scared for him in this isolated meta with more attention. I don't think he's as consistent as Bwipo and Fudge to play that low attention role. So I'm going to be leaning on River to be pumping that attention over. But Quid is generally a mid laner that requires a little bit more attention than others. So I actually don't really want General Sniper to be taking that away from him. So maybe General Sniper could get it done and find those solo kills like he did before, but I'm just not exactly confident. And Licorice, solid top laner, just hasn't shown it in the last year. When he was on Golden Guardians, of course it was a successful piece. Everything was working, but you saw last year it just wasn't as convincing of a performance for him. So just going to end up at 8th based off of that alone. Now jungle. Jungle. There's a lot of things that have remained the same from last year. So we got Inspired, River, Blabber as my 1, 2, 3. I don't think I have to explain any of these. River, great roamer. Inspired, great carry, especially with the meta. We were seeing a lot more Nidalee and Zyra and LCK, but you know, the staples of Vi, Xin Zhao, and Sejuani are definitely still around, which is why I see Blabber and Umti and XU as well just being able to be that step above. Same for Contracts. This is a great pool for Contracts, but unfortunately Contracts, I feel, just didn't show as much as XU did. XU was on a slightly worse team compared to Contracts, so I actually would prefer having XU now, and we'll see if he's able to live up to what I've placed him at. Number 4 is definitely something no one else is probably going to put him at, but just based off watching those games and seeing what XU can do, I think he actually applied great pressure and eased a lot of pressure on these lanes that just weren't that consistent for Dignitas last split. So I'm pretty excited to see that. Umti in 5th. Obviously, I'm an Umti believer, but if I'm going to put him on a 8-player tier list, I'm definitely not putting him high up because he was a liability at Worlds, in my opinion. Yes, he has the shot calling factor, but that cannot be part of my factoring in on how skilled a player is during these player rankings. I'm mainly considering meta, which he's fine in. This is a fine meta for him. And also the actual player performance. Now, his shot calling is one thing, so maybe they just have crazy objective control and he's able to snowball off of that. But Umti on his own, in his lonesome, without the TL pieces, I think places him at 5th. 7th and 8th are Audi and Shaden, something like that. Either way. So Audi for me, top of LATAM, one of the greatest players of that region. However, being the best in that region does not necessarily mean you're going to be a top team in LCS. I think it puts you somewhere between the 3rd to 7th range as far as teams are concerned. Generally, sometimes they'll squeak out and they'll beat 100 Thieves. But those are definitely the outlier, not the rule, and I feel like Summit was definitely the strongest piece of that team, where Rainbow 7 really did find the most success, so I'm not exactly confident in Audie's performance to actually be able to clutch up in that scenario and really reproduce those results he found on that world stage. Now, lastly, we have Shaden, and Shaden previously played very briefly with Jojo Pyun and Evil Geniuses, and it just didn't look that convincing. And if you're going to present me a list of all of these junglers, unfortunately, that's just going to put Shaden at the bottom. I don't think he showed anything particularly well. He was definitely worse than Greg at the time, so it definitely was not a great look for him, and I'm just not so confident that he's going to really pick up the pieces, and, that's okay, but that's how jungle kind of pans out. Now, of course, that leads us into our next topic, of course, is mid. So, we just talked about junglers, and jungle is such an important role that really definitely determines the pace of the game along with support. Very important roles, but guess what? Carry mids are back. They are the name of the game right now. You're thinking things like Victor. You're thinking things like Akali. These champions that have big pressure spikes, and we're seeing some crazy stuff because of Fearless, which is implemented in this split, such as Zoe or some other crazy picks that, Showmaker wants to play. LeBlanc is definitely still in the pool. There are so many champions in the pool, but guess what? They all lean heavily towards that carry playstyle rather than that supportive playstyle, so that's definitely taking a little bit of a look here as we go into our mid list here. 1 to 8, it's going to be Quad, Quid, Loki, Saint, APA, Keen, Abadage, and Palafox. So, most notably, you're going to see that Quad and Quid are at the top. I think that is no surprise to anyone. If you're looking at the trends so far, FlyQuest are topping the board for most of these. Just going to keep that going for sure. Just considering, you take Genji to Game 5 in World's Quarters. Definitely means you're going to be the top of NA. That's just how it is. So Quad definitely showed great performance against Chovy. Definitely put him on the back foot. And also just completely gapped APA during that World's performance. So I really got to give it to him. Definitely performed hell of very, super well. And I think the champ pool is going to be quite fitting there as well. So Quid is going to be the follow-up there. Once again, it's carry mids. And you're going to play around a very high-pressure jungler. Does that remind you of any other team than 100 Thieves? That is the 100 Thieves style. And that is how I expect them to continue to play throughout this year. That is just how it's going to go, and hopefully Sniper can really hold his own, but Quid should still be able to succeed, even though he didn't have the best Worlds performance, and I kind of chalk that up more to how much time they had of practice, and also just nerves for sure. I mean, that team looked completely abashed against Rainbow 7, so not exactly the best sight there, and then they lost to PSG, but PSG is definitely a good team, so no shame there. Moving on, number 3, Loki. New to the LCS, previously played on Hanwha Life Academy. Definitely was not a good team, but Loki by far the best player on that team and looked great during it. I'd say there's a reason that Cloud9 was so eager to so eager to be okay with dropping Jojo Pyun in exchange for Loki here. So kind of not too surprising to see Loki in this spot at 3rd. Don't have too much to show. Obviously he's still unproven, but guess what? Quad and Quid were both unproven when they first came on, and pretty quickly they were already showing their star power coming from that LCK Challenger Circuit. Speaking of LCK Challenger Circuit, we got Saint. Saint, most notably, was on the same team as Thanatos, that Damwon Challengers roster 2 years ago. However, he was the sub. He was actually behind another one, but the following year he became the main mid laner here for LCK Challengers for Damwon. So, carrying that momentum over, they actually ended up getting 2nd in the overall playoffs by the end of summer. So, still definitely a respectable performance. And if the trends are going to continue, I'm just going to keep putting them up here. So, Quad, Quid, Loki, and Saint are going to be your top 4 here. I mean, it's just the Korean quadfecta. All I could say there. Next, we have APA. APA, kind of up. on certain times the last year, kind of down on others, you know? I feel like the really tail end of the meta was not favorable for him at all. It didn't really feel like he felt that good. Had to rely back on that Tristana that just was so far out of the meta at that point. It just felt kind of bad. Can't play things like Yone that you'd expect and kind of want from your mid pool to have. So definitely if APA has been grinding, which I assume he has, he is one of those grinding players. Definitely hope to see some new flair in the champ pool because all of his champs are out. The things that you think of, Asol, Smolder, and Tristana, as well as Talia, really not that playable. I think Talia might have some fringe use cases, but Smolder's definitely dead, Asol's definitely dead, and Tristana, if he plays Tristana, put up the white flag. All I gotta say. So hopefully APA has really, solidified the champ pool so he can start contesting again for that 1, 2, 3 spot that you kind of expect out of Team Liquid of all teams. Next player is gonna be Keen. Keen's actually from that same Rainbow 7 team. Are you noticing a trend here? That same Rainbow 7 team that eliminated 100 Thieves in the playoffs. So obviously here, Dignitas is trying to play a bit of hardball and use Keen, who previously showed success against NA and did very well in those games against Quid in particular, to actually leverage some sort of success here. But unfortunately, Keen has been in Tier 2 for a long time. He's not this fresh, young, rookie Korean mid laner. He is Korean, but he just has spent a lot more time outside of that region and not able to access as good of solo queue in practice. So I'm just not as confident in his performance to actually put him up there with the 4 Koreans at the top. So that puts him at 6th. Next is going to be Abadage, who most notably was previously in that LFL split with Carmine Corp. France, they're blue, Carmine Corp blue, that's the right roster. And they ended up actually getting like maybe 5th through 8th in the actual EU Masters Summer Tournament, the official one. But honestly, it's a little bit suspicious of a loss because, well, not suspicious in the way of any match fixing or anything like that, but more suspicious in the way they actually the way the tournament was set up. It's a big 32 team bracket, just a bracket, or a 16 team bracket, and you just play straight up a bracket. And they happened to meet the one team that ended up taking it all, which is BDS, the academy team for BDS. So I can't really say how good or bad he was performing in those games, but all I know, Abadage definitely does not have the same hands as the top 4 in my opinion. Maybe the mind will make up the difference, but that's kind of what you're hoping for both Abadage and Palafox here. Palafox, another one that I feel like his champion pool has kind of, gotten targeted again. Usually you know him for Azir, Talia, stuff like that has a bit of playmaking, but is still kind of that control style. Orianna as well. These champs are not that present right now. Azir kind of picking up some play nowadays with the return of Azir. With Victor. So definitely some options there, but I don't know. Palafox just needs to prove it to me that he's back to where he was when NRG was succeeding. Until then, I'm going to have to put him at 8th. So that's pretty much it for the mid pool. And we're going to move on to the bot lane pool now. Bot's pretty simple. The best players are going to remain the best players. Some of the more rookie players are going to have a rougher time. So here we have Yon and Masu, who definitely showed exactly why they're there. Yon, the bright spot of Team Liquid. And if you know me, I was heavily a Yon hater for like the 2 years that they held on to him when they were going with like the Harry Yon roster, and it just didn't work out. I was like, just replace them both. You don't need Harry and Yon. But TourJJ believed in him, and honestly, showed exactly why he does believe in him. Yon is one of those carry players that you can play around, and when you have supportive pieces like APA, Umti, and Impact, you're going to need that hard carry, and Yon is the one who usually is going to step up when it matters. And unfortunately, it wasn't good enough to actually make them get into quarters, but remember, they were about to make to quarters. They only lost to one team, FlyQuest. And FlyQuest, if you looked at the other roles, completely stomped them. I put them in first place for all the other roles. This is the only, spoilers, the only position where I feel like Team Liquid has a slight edge. And Masu, definitely good. Obviously, rookie of the split, or rookie of the year, I guess. And it had a huge impact. But, definitely still has some room to improve. I feel like isn't that solidified carry that you can rely on every single game like you can like Yon. Now, I know what everyone's saying. Henna in third. Are you crazy? This guy has been a bottom feeder in LCK. He was on Fredit Breon and that Fear X roster that no one liked. Well, that's not true. Fredit Breon's got the spice, but guess what? Henna, not the problem in any of those teams. And if anything has ever shown me about the skills of LCK players as they come down, at least for the first split, like, for instance, I feel like you bring any LCK AD carry in particular, for the first split, they're smurfing. Now, second split could complete different story. There have been many repeated incidents of AD carries kind of falling off a cliff by that point. But Henna, it's his first split, and I think he will do extremely well, despite coming from a team that's a little bit lower on the rankings, because I don't think he was ever the worst player on that team. I think he was always consistently one of the better players on the team, and unfortunately just could not pick up the wins to actually make it out of that 8th, 9th, 10th place position in LCK. Now, that moves on next. FBI, who's returned to the 100 Thieves fold here. Going to be pretty consistent. I think it's a good meta for him. It's a lot more supportive AD carry, stuff like Jhin. Kind of what FBI was known for, in my opinion. Like, Jhin is definitely one of those picks that he plays a lot. Ashe is still in the meta, so these kind of utility-heavy AD carries definitely are something I expect of him, and he should be quite proficient at, so that puts him at 4th. Bvoy and Sven. Now, Bvoy, mechanical proficiency, very high. Team fight positioning, amazing. But he's just an AD carry. You know, there's nothing really special. He's just a very skilled AD carry. Now, Sven, on the other hand, maybe a little bit less skilled in a certain way, because he's been, he hasn't been an AD carry for a while. He was at Dignitas playing AD for a while, but he was going from support, and he wasn't a standout player on that Dignitas roster when they really did need one a lot of the time. So that's going to place Sven at 6th just for those reasons. He is a very important piece to C9, but I'll say he's not exactly going to be their hard carry in this scenario. Now, Tomo and Scary Jerry, the two kind of rookies to the team. Can they prove me wrong and make it out of this spot? Of course. Tomo, very consistent, kind of similar to how I felt like Cody's son was back in the day, where he'll just pop off in a late game team fight, and it's like, oh, well, Tomo just smurfed the game. Suddenly we're back in. But, it's going to have to be proven to me. You're a rookie, and you're playing against, like, the strength of LTA, I feel like, is extremely high this season, where I had a lot of difficulty placing anyone I can kind of believe in maybe improving throughout the split higher than where they are right now. So Tomo, unfortunately, is going to be put at that 7th position, and then finally Scary Jerry is going to round up the list for Disguised here. Obviously, no one knows who this guy is. If you watch Tier 2, you'll know who he is, though. Scary Jerry, definitely a name you will be familiar with, more because it rhymes than actually being a very skilled AD carry. Definitely had a lot of improvement over the last year. To be able to make it into LCS is definitely an achievement. And I think, they put some players that are pretty consistent around him and can definitely boost him to becoming a great AD carry. But right now, unproven talent have to warrant an 8th place spot. Moving on, we got support. Of course, support. Busio kind of proved at the end that, hey, I know he has some problems with champ pool, but guess what? Right now, meta is engaged, and I think with Masu Busio really shaping up to be a good bot lane, if they practiced a lot to make sure that they're more consistent than they were, I think they'll be at a great position compared to where they ended the year. Now, Core JJ, I'm putting at 2nd. I think he just had some consistency issues. When Core JJ is on, the best support in the league, easily. But Busio barely edges him out just because some of the X Factor picks, support's a kind of weird role right now where you're seeing a lot of weird stuff get played, especially because of Fearless. Like, obviously, the one you've definitely seen in your solo queue at least once is that Elise support. And if I'm going to peg anyone to play that, it's going to be Busio. So that's why I'm putting him there at the 1st place position, and then Core JJ as 2nd. And then Huhi is going to be the one that I'm going to actually put in 3rd. For a variety of reasons, I think, once again, we're back into engage meta. He doesn't have to deal with playing enchanters, which I feel like was a big problem for Huhi. similar to Vulcan, where you just don't want these players on enchanters, really liability type stuff when they are actually on not on engage. Because Huhi likes to make plays, he likes to make bot dives, and guess what? With Otacon and all these extra objectives, Huhi's the kind of support you want. Core JJ Huhi should be extremely well positioned to succeed in this meta, but you know, it'll have to be proven to me because they just haven't been as good as they have previously shown. Vulcan, just good engage, very solid player, puts him right in the middle of the list very easily. Could have been higher maybe if I didn't value Huhi. Kind of an X factor with his skill. Like, there's some games he just runs it down, some games he looks like an absolute smurf. So for me, that's more valuable because you're going to need to win 2 out of 3 games, and if you can have one sneak away because Huhi just completely smurfed it, then hey, perfect. And then we have Seos, which I know many people are going to be surprised to see Seos this high, but Seos, like Audi, is a very consistent player from LATAM North. Also part of that R7 roster, once again, that did to beat 100 Thieves. So I expect good things out of Seos, and I think, especially with how weak the bottom of the table here is with Isles, Leons, and Ayla is, I really do think Seos has a great opportunity to be able to cement himself as a pretty good support among this roster, but we'll have to wait and see, you know? You don't know. You can really peak at certain times, and maybe Seos just found his stride every single time near playoffs, so we'll have to see if he can contend with the best. Isles, Leons, Ayla, not too much to say. I just don't think the meta is the best for them, especially not Ayla. I think Ayla is much better when he's on those enchanters. I think when you put Ayla in a lane priority type matchup, I think it's a lot better. But right now, everyone's playing Leona and Nautilus and stuff like that. That really sets up the team so you can go have these giant fights and win them out. But that's not exactly Ayla's style for me. So yeah, that's kind of how the lineup goes. And Lions, I don't know too much about. All I know is people do believe in this guy, so I'll give some faith over and put him above Ayla just because I'm not a believer. And you know, that's part of Ayla's brand, to be hated, unfortunately. Not that I'm hating him, I'm just saying I'm gonna put you at 8th. Prove me wrong, as you do. Now, full chart. You get to see the actual full list of rosters. As you can see, some trends here, you know, lots of green at the top. Cloud9 pretty square away in the middle. TL kind of sprinkled in at the top in the middle, so definitely some trends. A lot of yellow on the bottom side, so you could definitely see where this list is going. So now, math time. I promise this will be short. It's not going to be that long. I'm just going to show my kind of methodology. So what I do is, let's go back to this chart. What I do is I assign every player here a number, right? So 1, you get 1 point. 2, you get 2 points. 3, you get 3 points. 4, you get 4 points. And 5, you get 5 points, and so on. So basically, Whippo-inspired quad, Masu and Busio are with a total of 6 points. And the lower your score is, the better. That means you're higher ranked. So now, showing this. This is where the chart initially places all of these teams after calculating the results. So we got 100 Thieves at 23, Cloud9 at 19, Dignitas at 32, FlyQuest at 6, Shopify at 28, CL at 15, DSG at 28, and Leon at 29. So, what does that mean? TL and FlyQuest are pretty much locked in at 1st and 2nd. I mean, Cloud9's pretty close on their tail with 19 away, but to be honest, I don't feel comfortable putting anyone above TL. I think those two are locked, which is why you're seeing locked on your screen here. I basically disregarded them for the future calculations, and these are the future calculations. This is kind of bias. This is adjustment. How I'm actually feeling about these teams, and after I see them kind of laid out like this, do I actually agree with the rankings that I made player-wise, and is there any X factors that makes them move up or down? Just for some regulation, this is a 5-point scale according to this standard deviation I calculated between these 6 teams. Not including those. So 5 points is the max up or down a team can go. And you want negative values so you could go lower and make your score go down. So as you can see here, Cloud9, I gave a bias of -3. So I think they're actually better than a 19, but still not better than TL. I would have put TL at a -5, to be honest. I think they have always been the team that's the pinnacle of better than the sum of their parts. So no matter what, Cloud9 was not going to catch them in my mind, according to just the numbers straight up. 100 Thieves, I also rated as -3. I think they have a lot of X factor as far as River's performance, and if River can somehow convince Ayla to help him, I think they could be a good team. That's really what it comes down to. Now, Shopify, I gave him +1. I think their roster really depends on the form of these players. You know, you have things like Contracts, Palafox, who did not look so good. Same for Fudge. So, will we see them rise up and really perform? I'm not so confident. So I gave them a 1 rating. It's not going to change their score because, unfortunately for DSG, I gave them 5. Which really comes down to the fact that they got a lot of veterans on their team, but they also have a lot of rookies. Or not rookies, but kind of pieces that haven't worked as well. You know, you got, of course, you got Castle, XU, Abadage, Scary Jerry, and Huhi. So, can Huhi and XU find a common ground and become successful? Can Abadage make sure he's back up to performance standards when he was back on 100 Thieves, you know? These are kind of unanswered questions, and that's going to give them a 5 just because inconsistency is what really kills your playoff chances in these leagues. So, and Castle, I'm not sure if he's going to be as cohesive as I'd like, you know? There's always a chance of him disconnecting, and that really did burden them. Kind of similar to how Thanatos was with Cloud9, so you can see I gave Cloud9 a -3 despite that difference, just because I think they're X Factor players, and now that they have a shot caller of Sven behind them, I think they're going to be a lot better. So, on top of that, we got Leon, who I gave a 4. Kind of cheating. I just think DSG and Leon are pretty similarly ranked. Now, the only reason they only got a 4 is because Saint and Henna, I was actually initially going to put Leon above them, but Saint and Henna could just smurf. And you know, if DSG is not playing their A game, they're going to lose games to Saint and Henna alone, in my opinion. So we'll have to see if that's going to be the case. But that puts them even at 33. And then Dignitas, I'm going to put a -1 rating on them. I believe in the parts that they've assembled. I think Surdy will surprise people. I think Keen is better than his rating shows. And I think Tomo and Isles is just a consistent threat. And I think, you know, consistency is so important in making sure you can beat the people that are potentially worse than you 100% of the time. And I can't really see any big holes in the Dignitas roster besides maybe Shaden. So that kind of makes me a little bit more faithful that if someone is really performing on the day poorly, they won't drop down to match them in that performance valley. So where does that put all the teams? Final ranking. FlyQuest, TL, Cloud9, 100 Thieves, Shopify, Dignitas, Leon, and DSG in that order. Is it that crazy? Not really. Now, this is where it comes a little bit more interesting on what am I actually thinking about these teams. So, we have FlyQuest and TL, which, very obviously to me, top 2. And I think both of these teams can be expected to maybe take the trophy. Almost guaranteed. Obviously, this will be buckling up straight to that first season kickoff tournament with all of the winners of each league, plus I think the second place. I'm not entirely sure, but either way, expect these teams in the finals. I'd say I'd give them 80% chance that these two teams are the ones that make it out, unless something goes catastrophically wrong, because they also are keeping their rosters for the most pretty much intact, so they should have a very good foothold on how they like to play with each other, where some of these other rosters have changed significantly. That puts Cloud9 and 100 Thieves at that 3rd, 4th position, which I think is not surprising to anyone. River Quid is still going to be a very solid combo, and with Sven now in the roster for Cloud9, they should be a lot more consistent and hopefully able to leverage Thanatos' lane advantages in top lane to actually be able to push them over the line and make it to playoffs. Woo! Sorry, had to rub it in. That was still crazy. I predicted Cloud9 to do great that split. Guess what? They did terrible. Okay. Now, Shopify. Very interesting position they found themselves in. This is definitely I'd say a pretty good dark horse team. I mean, I don't think they're going to win the split, but I do think they can definitely upset some of the teams above them. Like Cloud9 and 100 Thieves, I would be scared sometimes going to Shopify matches if Contracts and Palafox are hitting on the day. You know, if they're feeling the comps that they're playing and they're able to find their groove again, like the NRG kind of magic that they used to have, I think this team has a great roster behind them. I think B-Voy and Fudge should be very consistent for them, and now it's just about placing the final few pieces in. Lastly, Dignitas. I said I believe in the pieces they've assembled. I think it's very consistent, so I put them above. And then finally, 7th is going to be Leon, which I said, hey, I don't know if they're going to be better than DSG. I can't tell, but either way, 7th and 8th are both out of playoffs if they can't shape up. So either way, it doesn't matter too much between these two, but I generally just trust in Leon just a little bit more just because they have such great threats with Saint and Henna. Will the other pieces pick up, will the other, players on the team pick up everything else to actually make them a full cohesive team that can contest the top? I'm doubtful, but they definitely can. I think there's a possibility. Like Licorice, if he has one of those Golden Guardians legacy performances, definitely could take down at least half the top laners in the league easily. And unfortunately for DSG, that does put them in 8th, but that's what people expect. DSG, they're scraping in. They're the new org on the block, and they're gonna have to fight for it. If you want to stay in the league and really prove and earn that fan base that you guys already have based off just being associated with Toast, hey, show me. Prove me wrong. I welcome it, and I think it'll be great for the league. With that, that's the end of my power ranking. So I don't really have too much to add, but remember, if you made it this far, just, give me any feedback you'd like. If you don't like my list, tell me. If you don't like how this video was formatted, tell me that as well. I don't really mind. But if you liked, definitely drop a like. And if you liked, also consider subscribing. I do Pokemon card content and this esports stuff pretty often. I try to do videos about 1 to 2 times a week, depending on my schedule, but I was too excited to actually make a tier list again and kind of break it down with my weird math stuff with players, and I hope you guys liked it. But with that, Golden Gad out.